All right. So today I want to talk about a little bit about policy. So while we all have laws like CFAA and ACTA and TIP and Title 18 and Title 17 and about a bazillion other regulations that regulates our industry. If you take a look at our industry in terms of regulation, right, you have nuclear power is the most heavily regulated industry. Then you have medical, then you have banking, then you have us. We have information security. We're the fourth most heavily regulated industry, and it's because we're dangerous as crap, right? They want to make sure that we're doing what we need to be doing and not doing things that we're not supposed to be doing, right? So that's why I kind of say that if you give me about 4 hours with nothing to do, I become a very dangerous person because I'm bored. And what happens when we're bored? We do stuff. We do stuff that we're definitely not supposed to do, and I am definitely guilty of that. So here's what ends up happening, right? And if you've never gone to SANS, SANS is actually a really good resource, right? So SANS got a bunch of information security templates. So you guys can kind of see what is generically usable in the industry today, right? So law drives policy, policy drives procedure and your actions on what you're doing, right? So if the security policy says, thou shalt scan my network every week, then that's what you need to be doing, because that's what the policy states. And if you miss a week, then it's a policy violation, right? So if you go on vacation and the network scanning doesn't happen, then that's a policy violation, and that's a violation of the company, which then may have legal or shareholder ramifications, right? Because most of our companies are public. So there's actually three big ones that govern what we do right now. One is called Gramm-Leach-Bliley, which is privacy. Everybody get that thing in the mail every year from the bank saying, here's the information we collect on you and here's what we do with it. We collect everything about you and we sell it to the highest bidder and then we turn it over to the NSA because Lord knows you could be a terrorist. Right? My checking account was $71 in it every time I make a transfer. Me, my wife, my bank, and the NSA know about what I'm doing. I'm good with that. Then we have Sarbanes-Oxley. If you are a publicly held company, if you have shareholders, right? So this doesn't apply to mom and pop, all right, that owns their own little quiet bookstore with no shareholders. It does apply to True Value, right? Because they're actually leasing that name, True Value, from the company. They're actually a franchise. So we'll cover franchises too, right? So here's what ends up happening. In Sarbanes-Oxley, there's two sections in there, 402 and 404. And those are the two sections that really govern what we do. And what ends up happening is that the CEO of the company is supposed to sign off and say, we've taken all necessary and appropriate, key word here, appropriate for our industry processes to keep our data safe. Now, underneath those appropriate policies, you'll find some industry ones like PCI DSS, right, which is the Payment Credit Industry Payment Processor System. So if you're PayPal, you have to follow underneath PCI DSS. If you're Macy's, if you are a healthcare company, you fall underneath, if you're a public company, you fall underneath Sarbanes-Oxley and PCI DSS because you're a payment processor, because you're taking in money from patients, right? And you need to run those credit cards or cash those checks to get them into the system. So each one of these things specifies what you can and cannot do. If you've ever gone through a PCI DSS audit, someone's going to come in with a checklist. Do you have a firewall? Yes or no? Do you have rules in that firewall that block these ports? Yes or no? They don't go back and verify it. They actually say, hey, here you go, right? Those checklists are what your senior managers will then sign off on, saying, okay, we have appropriate and reasonable to our industry, right? So Sarbanes-Oxley, reasonable and appropriate. HIPAA, Healthcare Portability Insurance Act, right? Really kind of interesting. Health information, yeah, whatever. All right, so HIPAA, not HIPPO, HIPAA, although hippos are cute when they're babies, they get really big. HIPAA is cute when it was a baby, but it got really, really big. It mandates a ton more stuff that you need to do. Encrypting medical records, encrypting your databases, encrypting communications back and forth between patients. Right? Back in the day, back about a decade ago before HIPAA came out, you could actually talk to Premera Blue Cross over instant messaging, Yahoo Chat. And you'd give them your social security number over Yahoo Chat so they could bring up your medical record, and they'd be talking about the bad case of AIDS or herpes or viral meningitis or you got to stop beating your kid over Yahoo Instant Messenger. HIPAA stopped all that, right? Which is actually really a good thing, because you don't want to send your social security number across Yahoo Messenger, right? That's generally a bad idea. Just saying this out loud. Not across Skype, Yahoo Messenger, or anything else. So these security policies are in place to kind of govern a minimum reasonable and appropriate level of behavior within the company for how we use or secure our electronic assets. That's essentially all they are. Right? When you guys started here at the school, you signed your acceptable use policy for the Highline network, right? And you do that every quarter, and everybody's done it for this class for this quarter, right? 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 You've all signed your AUP for this quarter, for this class, and yeah, right? They're all online now. You guys remember the link, right? All right, I'll get that up here in a minute. But you got to, yeah, you guys got to make sure you sign those because that's our get out of jail free card. Has anybody ever read that acceptable use policy from the school? It basically states that you are absolutely solely 100% responsible for anything you do, and we will prosecute you. And because we are a Washington state level entity, Washington State can then choose to go after and file their own charges beyond what the school can do. And if you break something federal, you could hit with school, state, and federal. So if you go home and you hack a bunch of stuff, you take out the Bank of America, you take $10 million out of Bank of America and shy off to Belize, there you go. We're going to notice and we're going to say a whole bunch of stuff about it, and life will be interesting, right? So policies, if you actually want to read a policy besides the one that you guys have actually done, SANS has got some really good policy. And I'm going to start off with the first one, the ethics policy. Right? What are ethics? What drives ethics? Morals. What else will drive ethics? Yep. All right, so ethics basically, how you were raised. What did your parents tell you was right and wrong? Did they stop you from touching the hot burner on the stove? Did they tell you not to beat on your sister or your brother? Did they take you to church? Did they point at movies on HBO and say, don't do that till you're 18? Right? So what your parents instilled in you is the foundation of ethics. The foundation of ethics is how you were raised, what your parents taught you was right and wrong, and if you have a religious upbringing. Right? Some religious upbringings take, some don't. Right? Sometimes we try to deprogram ourselves from our religious upbringing, but it's always going to be there because it governs how we view the world. And ethics is a big part of viewing the world. If you are a banker, if you are JP Morgan Chase that just paid $2 billion in fines because they knew what Ernie Madoff was doing, for them that was not an ethical violation because of the culture of the bank. Right? JP Morgan has set aside $28 billion, $28 billion, right? Almost 1/20th the amount of money it would take to alleviate poverty worldwide for fines. Just for fines. Because of the ethical and legal culture of that organization. Right? It's perfectly acceptable within that as long as you don't get caught. How many of us have done stuff that says just don't get caught? Don't leave any marks. Right? We've all done it. Right? So we don't have, ethically, we can go, okay, that's beyond our sense of ethics. My sense of ethics says I should pay my bills on time and not do this or not do that, right? My sense of ethics says I own an RX-8, which is a really, really, really fun, nice sports car. That is that when I'm driving it, the car is at its happiest when it's doing 100 miles an hour. Not me. I'm good with that, but my car is the happiest because that engine is just screaming beautifully, right? So my sense of ethics says 100 miles an hour on I-5 is just fine. I'm good with that, all right? Now, this one says, for the ethics policy, a culture of openness, trust, and integrity within business practices. So, fairly decent, right? Culture of openness. What is a culture of openness? You guys, when you talk to each other, you say things, but you would never want your teacher to hear them. I know this for a fact. I'll say things to other instructors that, for the love of God, I do not want Amelia to know we're saying this stuff, right? So culture of openness. Can we really have a culture of openness? Can we really equally talk to each other openly about situations? Probably not. Right? It's a nice way of saying culture of openness is a beautiful thing, right? But it doesn't necessarily always take. And it's because we get locked up by our worldview, we get locked up by our ethics and our sense of morality, right? My sense of morality says if I don't have anything nice to say about you, don't say anything at all, right? That's how I was raised. Always look at the positive things that that person is contributing, even as they're stabbing you in the chest with a knife. You can at least see their face. They're right here. right? But that's how I was raised. Don't say anything bad about anybody, because they're not there to defend themselves, and they should have that opportunity. Integrity. What's integrity? Huh? Honest. Okay, what else could be integrity? We can't even define it. If we can't define it, then the corporation needs to define that for us. What is that corporate culture or that school culture looking at the words of integrity? Right? How does that individual organization define that word? Because each organization is different. Each classroom I have is different, and I love that about teaching. Right? Everybody's different when I go into a different class, because you all make up a composite group. You are the company. And each one of you looks at the world a little bit differently. We've all had different experiences being raised. We all have children, which causes its own sense of ethics and morality. I was taught, I swear to God, I'd never spank my children, but then there you go, you find out that you are. Right? There's these little things that we do, but how does that tie into integrity? Right? Because we white lie all day long. Did you get me anything for my birthday, honey? Why, no, dear, I didn't. Quick phone call, I need flowers now. Right? It's that kind of thing. We white lie all the time. What did you get me for Christmas? Nothing. And the next thing you know, there's like 10 prezzies under the tree. Right? So we do this. So what's integrity? Is it just reserved for the big lies? No, I didn't steal the $2 billion from you. No, these really aren't tickets to Belize. And you'll see me bring up Belize a lot because Belize doesn't have an extradition treaty with the United States. And it's a lot warmer than Russia. Right? So Belize is, if you're ever going to commit a crime, do a crime on a big level, millions or billions of dollars, and then shy off to Belize. Get your own little army around your own little compound, and you'll just be set for life. Right? Business practices. What's a business practice? What we do, what we make, what we service. Business practices can be as simple as this is the group that cleans the toilets and empties the trash every day. A business practice can be as simple as we shred all of our documents because we put them in the blue bin, right? A business practice can be we take this raw ore, we smelt it, we drop it into ingots, and then we turn it into rebar so that people can go build beautiful buildings. What happens if in that process you decide to cut corners and the rebar isn't quite right? And then someone comes along and buys that rebar and builds it into a building in downtown Seattle. And 3 years after that building's been released and totally bought out and everything else, they come in and say the building's structurally unsound because you used cut-rate rebar. A $1 billion building had to be taken down in downtown Seattle because someone cut corners and bought cheap rebar. Seriously. There were hundreds of units that all of a sudden had a net value of 0. So was that a good business practice or a bad business practice? Bad, unethical, horrible. All right. So see where policies get to be interesting? If we can't define it, if we can't say what integrity means to the company we work for, which is going to be really different than how I look at integrity, right? Because a lot of my early days were spent in an engineering family. My dad was an engineer in aerospace, and then I went and joined the Navy. All right? So my idea of integrity is probably radically different than everybody else's. Right? Because of those two things that were formative in my upbringing. Right? Company name is committed to protecting employees. What does protecting employees mean? You could. You could, because if you tell me that you're going to protect employees, that means you're going to come between me and anyone that wants to do me harm. And that's not necessarily the case. Because one of the cases I worked on at Microsoft was when actually we had an information security guy that had gigabits, and I mean gigabits. I mean almost a terabit of child porn on a server in the middle of Microsoft server farm down in Tuck 3. And he was accessing it all day, and it was not your normal. It was horrible, right? Did Microsoft protect their employee from the feds that then came and raided him? No, they hung him out to dry. They escorted his happy butt right off campus and turned him right over to the FBI and Bellevue Police. And he's like, well, what about protecting employees? There's always a reason why we don't do it. If you're committing a major felony on corporate networks, this is probably not something the company is going to protect you for, right? What happens if you go to human resources and complain about a boss? Odds are within 90 days you'll be given a pink slip. You'll be fired. Because human resources' job is to protect the company, not the employees. And nothing against human resources. As long as you know the rules, you can play the game, right? But human resources, if you go in and you complain about a boss, if you go in with a sexual harassment case and documentation, you're gone within 90 days. Which means then you get to go lawsuit, wrongful termination, sexual harassment, and all the rest of it. It's cheaper for the company to pay you the $20 million and drag you out in court for 7 years than it is to fire that manager. It's cheaper. So, protecting employees depends on the company. Protecting vendors, I've seen more vendors hung out to dry than anything else I've ever seen in this entire life. Vendors universally loathed, hated, along with contractors. Right? We need them, but we hate them. It's a huge love-hate relationship. And the company from illegal or damaging actions by individuals, either knowing or unknowingly. So if I knowingly turn around and steal the payroll database, connect my home PC to ADP, the company will protect me? How about if I unknowingly lose a laptop because I left it in my car with 800,000 patient records? The company's going to protect me? Right? So policies. You have to be really, really, really clear in your language. And I mean absolutely crystal clear. Because if you leave any ambiguity in that policy, we're going to start ripping it apart right off the bat. Right? You didn't know that leaving the laptop in the back of the car in the middle of the shopping mall would cause someone to break the window and steal that laptop. But everybody should know that. Right? You don't leave anything in your car kind of thing. Right? There's always a purpose. There's always a purpose for a policy. So there's always going to be a purpose section that says, thou shalt, this is the reason why you do it. A scope, the scope of the policy is who does this policy actually belong to, right? So this policy belongs to employees, contractors, consultants, temporary, and other workers at this company, including all personnel affiliated with third parties. So if I go and I decide I'm going to become a janitor and infiltrate Bank of America, which happens all the time, and someone leaves their username and password on the underside of their keyboard, which also happens all the time. Microsoft corporate policy states that thou shalt leave their username and password underneath their computer. I love that policy. All right. There was a point before Microsoft went over to smart cards that they actually did say if your passwords, because they went to complex passwords and no one could remember them, so they saw this huge spike in user password resets, so they just said write it down. Put it on sticky pad on the back of your keyboard so you never forget it. Security policy said thou shalt go into do complex passwords, at least 12 characters, letters, numbers, special characters. No one could remember them. It started costing them a lot of money in password resets, so they've changed their security policy to keep the complex passwords, but then write it down and put it underneath their keyboard. So sometimes policies can do really, really weird things, right? There's always an unintended consequence in everything we do, which can be an awful lot of fun, right? Personnel affiliated with third parties. What would be a third party, do you think? Huh? A vendor, the janitor service, Iron Mountain, where you keep all your backups, the guy that comes in the big shredding paper truck that will shred all your documents that you don't need anymore right there on the side of the street in the rain and in the wind, so that when you open up the bucket full of sensitive documents, the wind will come in and take them and scatter them down the street. Oh, no one's going to notice. Right? Again, it's that kind of process. We have to, as security people, think about what we're doing every day and how that may have all those unintended consequences. It's great to shred documents. It's great to send them out to somebody else. But what happens if you open up that blue bin and all the documents scatter down the street? We have the world's best, biggest tinfoil hat ever. Right? And we have to be really kind of clear in what we're hoping to do. Right? Executive commitment to ethics. Why would, well, we don't start off with top brass within company name. We say the CEO, CFO, CTO, CISO, all of what's called C-suite. Anyone whose title starts with a C is considered a senior executive. Right? Why would executive commitment to ethics matter? They're supposed to be setting the example, and like children, We want to make sure that mommy and daddy do exactly what they're telling us that we can do, and things that they don't do or things that we can't do. So if mom and dad say it's wrong to steal, and then the kid sees mommy and daddy shoplifting at Walmart, that sends a conflicting message, right? If we see the CEO of the company looting the company right and left, well, then doesn't that say it's okay to loot the company? Honestly, right? So executive has to be seen as following the same rules as everybody else. Otherwise, they send that conflicting message to all the employees, and the conflicting message can really be a pain in the butt, right? Because employees figure out that they can do the same things that mommy and daddy do. And it really is that example. When you are in the C-suite, when you are a manager, your employees are watching you for clues and keys to what they can get away with. If you're a manager and you're out for half the day at Starbucks, your employees are going to be out half the day at Starbucks. Anybody hear of the 5-minute rule? If your boss leaves, wait 5 minutes and you can leave too. Honest to God, I've seen that rule at more companies than anything else. Employee commitment to ethics, we expect you to obey and follow and treat everybody fairly, mutual respect. What's mutual respect? What happens if I want to be treated like shit? Seriously, if it's treating people like you want to be treated, what happens if I have a bent in my personality where I want to be treated like crap every day?
That's not going to work out.
Right?
No.
Yep. Mutual respect, though, right? So even that's hard in the IT industry, right? Mutual respect, because we look at the externals first, and then we look at the internals, right? And that's one of the reasons why we always hear this big argument about girls in IT, because boys are brutal to each other, and they figure that the girls should be just as equally brutal back. But emotionally, not geared for that. Just not, right? So when someone says, oh, it's just the boys, saying that as a girl, the boys just being boys, that's a big trigger. If you're a manager, you should be like going, okay, what does just being the boys mean, right? I've seen whole departments shut down because of this. Just the boys. What happens if the girls gang up? Because I've seen that too. Girls are like tons more viciously violent than guys will ever be. Guys are big, loud, brash, in your face about it. Girls are sneaky. No offense to ladies in the class. Girls are sneaky. They'll just kill you and you won't even know you got stabbed. You're just dead meat on the floor. You'll never see it coming. You'll never hear about it. It's all sneaky. And then all of a sudden you've been co-opted. You're gone. Company awareness, maintaining ethical practices, unethical behavior. The cool part is that they actually start trying to define what is unethical behavior. We want to avoid intent and appearance of unethical or compromising practices in relationships. So, as an instructor, I can't take anything from a student. I can't take a cup of coffee. I can't do anything. I have to maintain that professional relationship. I can't say, hey, there's a bar down the street. Let's all go have a beer and talk about ethics. I can't do anything like that. I have to maintain a really professional front in front of you, and I kind of fail a lot on that, but at least I try. All right? Right, so at least we define it, right? Unethical behavior for me would be to sleep with a student so the student gets a better grade. To take something from a student, because then that will look like favoritism, right? And favoritism is ugly. If you notice that I was favoring one student, how would you feel about that? What makes that student special? What is that student doing? Is that student sleeping with the instructor? Is that student paying the instructor underneath the table? Right? These are the things you're going to just automatically think of. China makes it a little bit more interesting. Right? China, there is no such separation, which I found interesting. The Chinese instructor can go up to a family, the child of the family that's in school, and say, you know, I'd really like some oranges. And the family will then go out and buy the instructor a caseload of oranges. Or I need a little bit of money, or I need this, or I need that. Right? Instructors' privilege in China is very radical, but it fits perfectly with the ethics of being in China. Right? So when I'm in China, if the student wants to go out and bring ice cream in the afternoon, that's just an expectation of behavior. And if I pull the American ethics like I have to here, which is I can't take anything from a student, I'll actually offend the bejesus out of my Chinese students, which is interesting because I brought my American ethics the first year that I taught there. And I offended everybody in that classroom by just being an American. right? What do you mean you can't take ice cream? We're all eating ice cream. What do you mean you can't? And then we had to have that conversation about American ethics versus Chinese ethics, right? Ethics is cultural, hugely, amazingly cultural, and it's an awful lot of fun, right? Enforcement. Enforcement is the hardest part of any policy because, we have favorites. We have people we like more than others. We always do, right? You like me more than you like Spam. You're going to treat me differently than you would a can of Spam, right? A can of Spam you're going to throw against the wall. Me, you won't pick me up and throw me against the wall, I would hope. But enforcement, if we state we will treat each other fairly and with integrity and with honor, and all of a sudden your CEO gets off because he was embezzling from the company, and the company quietly lets him go, rather than sending him to jail, which is what would happen to you, that sets up that dichotomy again. Does it kind of make sense why some policies can really cause a lot of problems? Right? Ethics policies are the hardest because we're all different when it comes to ethics. We all have our own little quirks when it comes to that. Ethics policies are pain. Right? Information sensitivity, you'll see this a lot. The U.S. military and the government are famous for this. Confidential, for official use only, secret, top secret, and then what's called compartmented information. Right? So a compartment is a smaller grouping. It's still top secret, but that compartment means it's even more heavily regulated than otherwise. If you go out to WikiLeaks or you go out to what Snowden's doing, you're going to see top secret SI rel to US, UK, Canada, Australia. That's called Five Eyes, right? So that's just basically a level of classification. There's stuff in the Snowden documents that are actually just rel US only, right? So we'll tell a little bit to our allies, but boy, we're keeping the good stuff at home, right? So much for sharing equally, right? So when you're looking at something like information sensitivity, usually you're going to have company confidential, you'll have sensitive, you'll have whatever internal markings, right? A policy like this is informative. That you know that if you have company confidential, you're like the CFO, you're an accountant or something else, you're dealing with sensitive data about the company, that you don't really want to go up and get on Twitter about and say, oh my God, they made hundreds of dollars per share before the 10Q comes out, because all of a sudden that will spike the share price, right? Or you don't want to say on Twitter they're going down because I've looked at their financials, because that will send their share price down, right? So you have to be aware of the information that you're dealing with and the sensitivity behind it. And then this is the one you guys are most familiar with, the acceptable use policy. I like to call it the get out of jail free policy, right? Because once you've signed an AUP, once you've signed the acceptable use policy, then that means you have taken on the responsibility for obeying and following that. And if we find out that you didn't obey and follow that, then these are the things that we can do. Now the humorous part is they make you sign it quarterly. I've never signed one. Not here. They don't have the instructor sign an acceptable use policy. Interesting, right? So the acceptable use policy are things that you can and cannot do, right? These restrictions are contrary to company name, established culture, openness, trust, integrity, blah, 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 blah. That we're good. So we're going to give you the internet. We're going to give you an intranet. So we're going to give you an internal network here, students.highline.edu. We're going to give you the external www, so you can go out to Google or CNN or Microsoft or wherever you need to go to find out what you need to find out. And if you turn around and you go ahead and off the school network, you go ahead and you start doing BitTorrent and you're downloading movies, well, we don't really want to get sued by the MPAA or by RIA, so we're going to block that. We're going to say you can't use the network to BitTorrent stuff. You can't do peer-to-peer on our network. You can't actively engage in hacking of the network. So you can't go, oh, this looks really, really cool, and send me a zombie alert on the phones. All right, everybody remember that one from a couple of years back? Student broke into a couple of computer systems and then sent out through the Highline alert system. Oh my God, zombies are going to kill us all. Funny as all get out, but violated the AUP. And then the stupid part was he got suspended for a quarter. You know, we could do that. But then he decided to fight it. And then all of a sudden he's facing state of Washington charges for computer fraud, trespass, abuse. And they started going after him on the federal charges underneath the CFAA. So if you hack this Highline network and they decide to suspend you for a quarter, just go away for a quarter and come back. All right, a lot easier. Because why? Federal pen sucks. It is not fun being in a federal penitentiary. I know I make it sound like I've actually been there. I just go visit some of my friends there. Now, that's the question. Why do I have 4 friends in the federal pen? Right? You're probably wondering, Dan, what did you do to them? Right? So here's the deal. Right, on that one is sometimes security engineers will exceed their authority. Right? And when you exceed your authority as a security engineer, it's generally a bad thing. So if you're on a contract with a company and they say, I only want you to look at this small segment of the network, right? And then you go out and you violate and you go all over the network free range, then you broke that contract, and under that you can be held liable because of what you had to sign when you started up at the consulting company, right? One guy found a bunch of Apple iPad unique identifiers on the internet provided by AT&T. And he went, oh, this is cool, and went through and downloaded the entire database of unique user IDs for AT&T iPad, iPhone devices. Had millions of them because AT&T left them wide open, and he thought it would be a good idea to download them. 7 to 10 years, having a good time. Aaron Swartz, anybody know him? Aaron Swartz worked at MIT, was a student at MIT. He was downloading stuff off of what's called LC Server, right? And LC Server is basically one of the big repositories for data. So if you go in and you're looking for something in the library for a periodic or a journal, or that's LC Server. He committed suicide because they were going to throw the book at him on CFAA. He was looking at 1 count of computer fraud and trespass for every document that he downloaded. And he had downloaded hundreds of thousands of documents because they told him not to do it. And then he decided, well, that's not going to work. So he went into the wiring closet at the college and bypassed everything. Because information wants to be free. Information doesn't want a darn thing. Right? This box of discs really doesn't want anything. It doesn't want to drink. It doesn't want to be free. It doesn't want to fly, be free. Right? So his sense of ethics said that it's a good idea to turn around and release data that's behind a paywall because everyone should know what's going on with this. Your tax dollars at work paid for a lot of this research. But he wasn't authorized to make that decision. The point where he went wrong was bypassing everything MIT put in place to stop him. Right? So if the school comes in and says, no, you really shouldn't be doing that, and then you turn around and you bypass everything at the school has that opportunity to then hang you out because you signed an AUP for the school that says you will not do these things. Right? So really read that AUP when you sign it. Right? It's really interesting when you actually do it. And that's one of the reasons why I call it a get-out-of-jail-free card. It absolutely 100% absolves this college of anything you do on the network. So they will sing like a canary. They will turn data and everything over to a responsible authority, depending on who the responsible authority is, without a warrant. They'll just turn it over. So if the state of Washington comes in and says, we need to know what Dan was doing on the network, they'll pull everything I ever did on this network. I'm good with that. General use and ownership, do not assume privacy on a corporate asset. So if you're here and you're keeping your personal records on your school hard drive, I can still open up that hard drive and take a look at it. There is no assumption of privacy on a corporate network, a school network. The only place you can maybe assume privacy is on your personal PC. And that's unless someone has taken an unnatural interest in what you're doing on that PC. So do not go out today and go and look up pressure cookers and backpacks when you go home. Anybody know what that reference is to? Boston Bombers. All right. They set the passwords. They said to keep the password secure and don't share accounts. You guys have seen that. All hosts, connected company name, extranet, blah, 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 shall be virus scanned. In others, these are the things that we have in place to keep bad things from happening. Right? Unacceptable use. They actually go out and they spell some of this stuff out. Things that aren't good for you to do. Right? Following activities are in general prohibited. Employees may be exempted from these restrictions during the course of their job descriptions. Administration, staff, security engineers, blah, blah, blah. Disrupting production services, a security engineer, that don't apply to you unless they tell you not to do it. Right? Under no circumstances authorized to engage in any activity that is illegal under local, state, federal, international law while utilizing company name. How many of you guys know what the computer laws are in India? I didn't think so. How many of you guys know what the computer laws are in China? Oh, I didn't think so. How many of you guys know what the computer laws are in Argentina? the way they've worded this, international law, boy, you guys are going to just get hung out if you violate anything. If you even turn around and sneeze, and that's illegal in some like faraway country like Pitcairn Island, it's illegal to sneeze. Dude, I got you. I'm good. Right? What's not legal here in the United States, or what's illegal in the United States, may be perfectly acceptable in a different country. Right? If you go and you look at the Chinese national network, it is a cesspool of hacking activity. China and Iran are the only two countries in this world that have laws that will actually have the death penalty for hacking. The only two countries. But if you look at the Chinese internal network, it is an absolute cesspool of people being hacked right and left. Right? You can assume that no one owns anything. And then you've got to deal with the state services. Anybody ever heard of something called Green Dam? Green Dam was a program that the Chinese government wanted all computer manufacturers to put on computers that were coming into the country. And basically what it was something like NetNanny. It was a way to immediately block at the source any URLs or data traversing to an IP range that they thought were not something you wanted to do. Right? So we all freaked out, said we can't do this because that would be illegal. Because American law said putting a program like that on a computer at manufacturer is technically illegal. Unless you're the government, then you can do it. Right? So again, what's legal here may be illegal someplace else. What's legal someplace else may be illegal here. So when you see something like international law while utilizing, stop and think for a minute what they're actually doing, right? Stop and think. They're taking a broad scope to something that may be perfectly legal in the United States, but absolutely 100% illegal in Cambodia, right? So kind of interesting. Yes? No, do not bring anything like this up at the interview. All right? Answer the interview questions, don't volunteer anything. But if you're going to go, like, say I wanted to go work for Bank of America, right? Bank of America, it's international, it's in almost every country in the world. I can use my Bank of America credit card when I'm in China. I can use my Bank of America credit card when I'm in Thailand. I can use it in New York and Seattle and when I'm in London, right? So that's not a problem because Bank of America has to go with the most restrictive policies first. And those are most likely going to come out of the European Union. Here's the loophole, right? European privacy policy is different than the United States privacy policy. So for the European customers, Bank of America will apply that policy across the EU. For American, they'll apply the American privacy policy, Gramm-Leach-Bliley. For China, there ain't none. They're good. They don't care. So anything that's held as a local asset in country follows underneath that particular country's laws, which makes a really international organization like Bank of America or even PepsiCo hideously complex to manage, right? So there's always a loophole in all of these things, right? So if that country, if that data is resident in that country, then the country's laws apply. So if I'm an American company and I have European Union data on my Amazon cloud in Virginia, then that data falls underneath the Patriot Act, which means the government can subpoena the entire Amazon server farm at any time, and Amazon will have to comply by giving them a complete and total copy of the Amazon server farm. However, if that data for the European group is resident in the London, England data center for Amazon Cloud, right, then the English government can then go and ask for a copy of all that data underneath the anti-terrorism laws, right? So Patriot Act, anti-terrorism laws, copies of data. Or they'll just sniff it as it crosses the wire back and forth, right? Which is what they were doing before everyone found out about what the government was actually really doing, right? But it really is, it's time, place, and location resident, right? That was the reason why they were able to bring down Mega Upload. Mega Upload is a Hong Kong registered company with main offices in Australia. The only thing they had was a small server farm in Virginia. And when the feds raided, they raided that server farm in Virginia and brought down a Hong Kong company with offices in Australia. So where your data resides is critically important. And right now, I know one company that turned down a contract with Amazon Cloud because Amazon could not guarantee the data would not leave the European Union. Because any company, underneath some circumstances, could go back and request that data because they think that they're spying on them. So it would have been a beautiful chance for Boeing to get a bunch of data from Airbus, right? It's that simple. But that's where these things come in, right? All these policies come in, and unintended consequences. I don't expect you guys to know all this stuff because I've been dealing with this way too honking long, right? But this is just the legal and policy complexities that we have to deal with as security engineers. And if this is your thing, you'll totally love this stuff, right? Because there's contradictions and loopholes in everything. In fact, I was able to find a loophole in one of my web hosting service providers so I could actually go do stuff I really wanted to do, but looked superficially illegal by the terms of service. But by the terms of service, they left a loophole in there that I was able to use. So now through my ISP, I can go do things because I found the loophole in the policy. And it was this really stupid wording on their part, which means they'll probably change it and then shut me down again. All right? System and network activities, you will be monitored, expect to be monitored. So how many people know here that when you go out on the internet, you go through a proxy server here at Highline? And they keep a URL record of everything you do by student ID because you have to log in, right? And by computer IP address. How many people know that? Just a handful? Expectation of privacy? Maybe, maybe not. Okay. Don't take school software. So I have a copy of Office 2007 with the license intact. I can't sell this to you, which is bad, right? But it's that kind of thing. You have to kind of think about what they're saying. Don't use school software for non-school purposes. Don't use school hardware for non-school purposes. Here's what's going to happen if you do. All right? So just kind of interesting, but that's basically the story of policies. Does it make sense? Oh, wait, this one I do want to cover. Sorry about that. Blogging. How many people here blog? No one blogs? How many people here write posts on Facebook? How many people here write posts on Gmail or on Twitter? Google Plus? Anything social media? Anything at all? Yeah. So here's one thing. Do you know that there's a policy that says instructors can't have Facebook connections with their students? It doesn't say anything about G+, by the way. There's just another loophole. It doesn't say anything about Twitter, but it says I can't be friends with you on Facebook until you graduate. It doesn't say anything about G+ or Twitter. Right? So the expectation of that policy is that if I can't do it on Facebook, then by inference, I shouldn't be able to do it on Twitter and G+. We have yet to test that one. I'm waiting to see what ends up happening with that. Right? But blogging is a real big issue. Right? When I was back at the healthcare company that I worked at, the healthcare company was trying to go public. Right? I don't know how many people heard this story before. A few? No one? Anybody? Bueller? Right? So they were trying to go public. They had spent millions of dollars in legal fees and state forms and time and energy and everything else. And then they had to go down and they had to testify in Olympia to the state insurance commissioner on why going public was a good deal for Washington and the company and everybody they dealt with. On the last day of testimony, after almost $14 million had been spent, and it was looking good that this company would get to go public rather than be a private company, the state insurance commissioner walked in with a sheath of papers. And those papers were blogging entries from employees within the company. He had found them. Someone had found them and turned them over to the insurance commissioner for the state of Washington. They got shut down. They weren't able to go public after spending millions of dollars to do this. Bloggers at the company actually got that entire thing pulled. So I got to be on the investigation of that, and that was really kind of interesting because we found out 3 of my security engineers, 3 of the people I worked with, 3 of the people I trusted were 3 of the bloggers out of the 4. The only reason why we caught him was because one of them had gotten so arrogant that he decided to print it off and leave it on the printer with his cover page, because each print job had a cover page to who it was and where it came from. He didn't think that anyone would ever catch him, so he was arrogant enough to print this stuff at work. blogging really freaks out a lot of people. If you get the chance, type in "fired for Facebook." Right? I hate my boss. Oh, I'm going to call in sick, but I have pictures from a party the night before. Oh, I'm going to blog about people at work by name. Or I'm just going to blog about what I'm doing by name, by person, by date. Oh, my CIS 166 class really sucks because he won't shut up and I really need to go to the bathroom and it's been 40 minutes. Right? Those kinds of things. Those kind of things get to be really, really, really interesting. So companies have started anti-blogging policies. In one company I worked for, the boss, the manager, the senior manager insisted that you be made friends on Facebook so he could monitor your Facebook personally to make sure you didn't say anything bad about the company, which then really kind of freezes you up because then you can't talk to your family and all the rest of it. So I actually have a dummy Facebook account that I'll give to managers and coworkers and other people that want to be nosy. State of Montana for a while there actually had as part of the employment process that you turn over your logins to Facebook and G+ and Twitter so they could go through your feed and look at all your private messages and everything else as a condition of getting even an interview.
Is that unconstitutional?
No, if you want the job, you'll do exactly what the company wants. There's a huge power differential between looking for a job and the things you'll do to get a job versus when you actually are comfortable in your position and you have the job. There's a huge dichotomy of power in that whole job search thing, right? Because you really want that job and you want to pay your bills. You're doing this for a reason, and that company can either pull that brass ring or not, and they will make you jump through as many hoops as they think that they can get you to jump. Now, the good part is that that wasn't legally challenged in the state of Montana, but it caused enough of an uproar across the internet that the state of Montana changed that rule about a year ago. Right? But for 5 years, if you wanted a job with the state of Montana, you would turn over access to all of your internet accounts. And, you know, some of this stuff can be really, really private. You're not going to just post out, "I've got cancer," or "I just came back from the doctor today, I've got AIDS." You'll send a private message through Facebook. You'll send a private text, right? But if your employer's got access to all that stuff, it would be horrible. So that's kind of it on policies. Are you guys comfortable with that? Is it a good thing I recorded this? Do y'all need like a 10-minute break? All right. Go ahead and take a break, man. Come back in 10.